The air in the room was strange. It smelled like the air after a big lightning storm, mixed with a sweet smell from the purple plants that grew in the corners. The room was made of a clear, crystal-like material that seemed to glow from within. It was beautiful, but it felt cold and unwelcoming. In the center of this large room stood the human delegation. There were only two of them. One was a man named Minsu. He wore a neat, gray uniform. He looked calm, but his hands were clenched tightly at his sides. He was a commander, a man used to talking and making deals. Next to him stood a woman named Gina. She was shorter than Minsu, but she held herself with a stillness that made her seem just as tall. She did not wear a fancy uniform. She wore the practical, dark green armor of a Terran Marine. It was scratched and marked from use. And on her back, she carried something that did not belong here. It was a sword. A real sword, made of polished metal, with a grip worn smooth from 1,000 holes. In a room of glowing crystals and silent technology, it was a silent, sharp piece of history. Across from them was the reason for the cold feeling in the room. He was massive, taller than any human. His body was covered in a hard, dark shell that looked like polished stone. He had multiple arms, and his face was not a face like theirs. It had large, dark eyes that seemed to be made of 100 smaller pieces, and sharp mandibles that clicked softly when he moved his mouth. This was Taeho. He was the supreme commander of the Cthar Imperium. He was the most important leader of his entire species. His voice filled the room. It was not his real voice. A small device on his chest took his clicks and rumbles and turned them into words they could understand. The voice was deep and had no feeling in it. "The discussion is over," the voice said. "These are our final words. Your human ships must leave the Cygnus Veil. Every last one of them. The people you have living on the planets Viridia and New Hope must leave. They will come to live on worlds that we control. They will be safe there. In return for this, we will name your species a protectorate. This means we will protect you. You will be safe from the Scourge. The Scourge is the thing that eats worlds. It is coming, and you are not ready." Behind Taeho, a huge window showed the blackness of space, dotted with countless stars. Minsu took a small step forward. He tried to keep his voice respectful. "Supreme Commander Taeho," Minsu began. "My people, we have fought for a very long time to have our own homes. We have bled for Viridia and New Hope. We cannot just give them up. There must be another answer. A different way." Taeho made a sharp clicking sound. It was a sound of annoyance. "There is no other way. Your technology is like a small candle. The Scourge is a giant wave of water that will put that candle out forever. The Scourge does not talk. It does not make deals. It only consumes. It only eats. Only the Cthar Imperium is strong enough and organized enough to fight it. Your wish to be free, to be independent, is a game. It is a game your species can no longer afford to play." While Minsu talked, trying to find the right words, Taeho watched Gina. She was not looking at him. Her deep brown eyes were looking past him, at the starfield on the big window. She was looking in the direction of the human colonies. She was not listening to the words of the deal. She was listening to what the deal really meant. She was listening to the threat underneath the words. Taeho felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. It was not anger, not yet. It was confusion. This small, soft creature was ignoring him. She was carrying a weapon that was thousands of years out of date. What was her purpose? Was she a guard? A symbol? He did not understand. Minsu was still talking. "We are not asking for much. We are asking for a chance. Our people are tough. We are resilient. We can fight alongside you, not under you. You are weak," Taeho stated, his voice flat. The word was simple, but it was meant to cut. "Your species is built on feelings and chaos. You laugh when you should be silent. You cry when you should be strong. You lack the control, the discipline that this war will demand. Let me show you." He moved one of his lower arms. A bright, blue light appeared in the middle of the room. It was a moving picture, a hologram. It showed a Cthar warrior. It looked much like Taeho, but built only for fighting. It was a thing of sharp edges and hard angles. In the hologram, this warrior was fighting a human combat drone. The drone was a machine of metal and guns, hovering in the air. The Cthar warrior moved with blinding speed. It sliced the drone apart with its natural armaments, its sharp limbs cutting through the metal like it was paper. In seconds, the drone was a pile of scrap on the ground. "You see," Taeho said, the hologram fading. "This is what we are. This is what we have become through perfect discipline. Flesh and blood, when it is Cthar flesh and blood, is the strongest weapon. Your human bodies are soft. Your minds are messy. You cannot win." It was then that Gina moved. She did not step forward. She simply turned her head. Her eyes, those two deep pools of brown, finally looked at Taeho. They were not full of fear. They were calm, like still water. "Your warrior," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was clear and sharp in the large room. It was the first time she had spoken. It has never been afraid. Taeho was taken aback. He tilted his head. Fear is a flaw, a sickness. We have removed it from ourselves. It makes us weak. Gina shook her head slowly. That is your weakness, she replied. Her right hand moved, coming to rest on the handle of the sword on her back. It was a simple, natural movement. You have removed the one thing that makes a being truly fight. You have never had to find courage. You do not even know what it is. Taeho felt his mandibles tighten. This was an insult he had not expected. He was being lectured on strength by a creature who carried a piece of sharp metal. An idea came to him. It was a proud idea. It would show them their place. It would prove, once and for all, how weak they were. You seem to value this old thing, he said, pointing a sharp limb at her sword. You think it has meaning. Very well. We will have a contest. A test. He gestured to one of the other Kthar standing silently against the wall. This one was slightly smaller than Taeho, but its shell looked harder, its limbs sharper. It was a herald, a messenger and elite warrior. My herald, Taeho announced, will fight your warrior. Her sword against our natural weapons. No other tools. If she wins, we will sit and listen to your foolish counterproposal. We will hear you out. If she falls, if she loses, you will surrender. Right here, right now. You will give me your word, and your people will become ours. Commander Minsu's face went pale. He looked from the deadly-looking Kthar herald to Gina. That's not a fair contest. It's a death sentence. But Gina did not look at Minsu. Her eyes were still locked with Taeho's many-faceted ones. She saw the pride there. She saw the absolute certainty. She saw that he believed this was already over. She gave one slow, simple nod. Agreed, she said. The silence after Gina's agreed was heavy and complete. It was as if all the sound had been sucked out of the crystal chamber. Commander Minsu turned to her, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He opened his mouth to protest, to call it off, but the words died in his throat. The look on Gina's face was not one of reckless anger or foolish pride. It was calm, resolved. It was the look of someone who had already seen the path ahead and had accepted it. Taeho, the Kthar leader, felt a surge of cold satisfaction. This was better than he had planned. A public demonstration of human weakness would be far more effective than any signed document. Their own stubborn pride would be their undoing. The contest will be now, his translated voice boomed. We will proceed to the proving grounds. He turned and moved towards a wide archway that irised open without a sound. His chitinous guards fell into step behind him. Minsu grabbed Gina's arm as she began to follow. Gina, this is madness, he whispered urgently, his voice tight. That thing is a living weapon. You saw the hologram. It will tear you apart. Gina gently but firmly removed his hand. Her eyes were still on the retreating form of Taeho. It is the only way, Minsu. He does not understand words. He only understands strength. But a sword? Against that? Our energy weapons couldn't stop their warriors in the border skirmishes. What can a piece of steel do? It is not about the steel, she said, her voice low and steady. It is about the will behind it. He needs to see that we are not just soft flesh he can push around. He needs to see that our spirit is a weapon he does not have. She walked after the Kthar, her boots making soft, sure sounds on the smooth floor. Minsu had no choice but to follow, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The proving grounds were a vast, circular room. The floor and walls were made of a dull, gray metal that seemed to absorb the light. The air was cool and still. There were no seats, no decorations. This was a place with only one purpose. Taeho and his retinue stood on one side of the wide circle. Minsu stood alone on the other, feeling very small and very human. In the center of the space, the Kthar herald stood waiting. It was even more intimidating up close. Its dark, segmented shell was covered in fine scratches and scars, a record of past battles. Its four arms ended in scythe-like blades that looked as sharp as any metal. It did not move. It did not fidget. It was a statue of pure, patient lethality. Gina walked to a spot a few meters from the herald. She did not look at Minsu. She did not look at Taeho. Her entire world narrowed to the opponent in front of her. Slowly, with a ritualistic grace, she reached over her shoulder and drew her sword. The sound was a clear, ringing note that hung in the quiet air. The polished metal of the blade caught the overhead lights, gleaming like a sliver of captured moonlight. She held it in both hands, point angled slightly towards the floor, her body relaxed but ready. Taeho's voice broke the silence. There are no rules. The contest ends when one can no longer fight. Begin. The herald did not wait. It exploded into motion. It was unbelievably fast, crossing the distance between them in a blur. One of its bladed arms sliced through the air where Gina's neck had been a split second before. But she was not there. She had not jumped back. She had simply shifted her weight, turning her body sideways so the deadly limb passed harmlessly inches from her chest. It was a minimal movement, efficient and precise. The herald recovered instantly, striking with 2 arms this time, a scissoring motion meant to cut her in half. Gina's sword came up, not with a wild swing, but with a solid, angled block. The clang of metal against the hard Cthar shell was a shocking, jarring sound. Sparks flew. The force of the blow was immense, but Gina absorbed it, her boots sliding back a few inches on the metal floor. She did not try to hold the blade there. She used the impact to push herself back, creating a sliver of space. Minsu watched, his breath caught in his throat. It was already clear this was not a fight of strength against strength. The herald was stronger, faster. Gina was like water. She flowed around the attacks. She deflected. She dodged. Her sword was a constant, shimmering barrier, meeting each strike not head-on, but at an angle, redirecting the herald's own power away from her. The herald was a machine of perfect, logical attacks. It aimed for vital points, its movements a brutal economy of motion. It was programmed for maximum efficiency. Gina was fighting something else entirely. She was not just defending. She was watching, learning. Her eyes were fixed on the herald's core, on the subtle shifts of its limbs before it struck. She was reading its body, predicting its rhythm. She saw an opening. As the herald lunged again, she didn't retreat. She stepped inside the arc of its swing. It was a terrifying, almost suicidal move. The bladed arm whistled past her back. And in that moment, when the herald was overextended and off balance, her sword flicked out. It was not a powerful blow. It was a precise cut like a surgeon's scalpel. The tip of her blade traced a thin, white line across the joint of the herald's leading arm. The herald recoiled, not in pain, but in surprise. A faint, clear fluid seeped from the shallow cut. It was the first mark Gina had made. Taeho, watching from the side, felt a prickle of unease. This was not going as the simulations had predicted. The human was not fighting to win quickly. She was fighting to endure. She was fighting to prove a point. The herald, for the first time, seemed to hesitate for a fraction of a second. Its perfect, logical mind was processing new data. The target was not behaving as expected. The target was not breaking. It renewed its assault, this time with more fury. Its attacks became a whirlwind of sharp limbs, a storm of cutting edges. Gina was forced fully onto the defensive, her sword a blur of parries and blocks. The loud clangs of metal on chitin filled the room like a frantic, dangerous song. She gave ground, moving backwards in a circle, her face a mask of intense concentration. A blade tip grazed her armored shoulder, tearing through the material and drawing a thin line of red. Another came close to her leg. She was being pushed to her limits. Minsu wanted to shout, to stop it, but he was frozen. He could only watch as Gina danced on the edge of death. But she never panicked. Her breathing, even in the midst of the storm, was controlled. She was waiting. She was letting the herald exhaust its energy. She was letting it believe it was winning. And then the moment came. The herald, frustrated by its inability to land a finishing blow, committed everything to a final, powerful lunge. It threw its whole body forward. All 4 blades aimed to impale her. Gina did not try to block it. She couldn't. The force would have shattered her sword and her arms. Instead, she dropped. She fell onto her back, sliding on the smooth floor directly underneath the lunging creature. It was a move of pure, breathtaking instinct. The herald passed over her, its blades stabbing into empty air. As it flew over her, Gina's sword, still firmly in her grip, came up. She put all the strength of her body into one upward, slicing motion. There was a loud, sickening crack. The herald landed awkwardly on the other side of her, stumbling to a halt. One of its 4 primary bladed arms, now severed cleanly at the joint, clattered to the floor beside it. Clear fluid pumped from the stump. The herald stood, stunned. His body vibrated with confusion. It was a flaw in its perfect system. It had lost a limb. Gina was already back on her feet, her sword held ready. She was breathing heavily now, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. But her stance was still firm. Her eyes were still clear. She did not press the attack. She did not try to finish the wounded warrior. She simply stood her ground, her sword pointed not at the herald, but past it, towards Taeho. The message was silent, but everyone in the room understood it. The contest was over. She had won. The silence in the proving grounds was heavier than before. It was no longer the quiet of anticipation, but the stunned quiet of a world turning upside down. The only sound was the soft, steady drip of clear fluid from the herald's severed limb onto the metal floor. The herald itself stood frozen, its body tilted. It looked at the stump where its arm had been, then at the arm lying on the floor. Its logical mind was trapped in a loop, unable to process this failure. It had been designed to be the pinnacle of Cthar warfare, and a human with a primitive weapon had broken it. Commander Minsu let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His hands were trembling. He looked at Gina, standing firm in the center of the circle, her sword still held ready. She was not celebrating. She was not smiling. She was waiting. Her eyes were fixed on the one who mattered. Taeho, the Cthar leader, felt a coldness seeping through his body, a feeling he had never known. It was not the clean, simple cold of space. It was a messy, confusing chill. His multifaceted eyes stared at his defeated herald, then at the human female. She was breathing hard, a little bloody, but she was standing. She had won. His pride, the unshakable foundation of his entire being, had a crack in it that he made a sharp, clicking gesture with one of his hands. Two other Cthar moved forward quickly. They did not look at Gina. They took the stunned herald by its remaining arms and led it away from the circle. The severed limb was left on the floor, a stark, silent testament to what had just happened. Taeho finally moved, stepping from the edge of the circle towards the center. His heavy steps echoed in the quiet room. He stopped a few meters from Gina, his gaze locked on her. "You did not kill it," his translated voice said. The flat tone was gone. There was a new, strange quality to it. Confusion. Gina slowly lowered her sword, the point resting on the floor. "That was not the point," she said, her voice raspy from exertion. "The point was to show you we are not weak. Killing it would have just shown you we are cruel. There is a difference." Minsu saw his chance. He walked forward, his heart still pounding, but his voice was firm now. "The terms of the contest have been met, Supreme Commander. You agreed. You will now hear our counterproposal." Taeho's head swiveled to look at Minsu. The crack in his pride widened. He had to listen to them. He had given his word. The word of a Cthar leader was absolute. He gave a short, sharp nod. "We will return to the chamber." The walk back felt different. Before, the humans had been prisoners walking to a judgment. Now they walked as... what? Not equals. Not yet. But as something Taeho could no longer simply ignore. The Cthar guards did not point their weapons, but their postures were tense, watchful. Back in the crystal meeting room, the atmosphere had changed. The air still smelled of ozone and alien flowers, but the feeling of cold, final judgment was gone. It was replaced by a tense, uncertain energy. Taeho took his place at the head of the room. He did not sit. He remained standing, a tall, dark figure of troubled authority. "Speak," he said to Minsu. The single word was heavy with reluctance. Minsu stood straight, clasping his hands behind his back. "Supreme Commander, we do not propose surrender. We propose an alliance, a partnership."
Taeho's mandibles twitched.
"A partnership with chaos? It is not possible. Your way of war is without order. It is unpredictable. That is our strength," Minsu said, his voice gaining passion. "You saw it yourself. Your herald was perfect. It was logical. It did everything right. And it lost. It lost because Gina did not do what was logical. She did what was unexpected. She did what was necessary. The scourge, you say, is a mindless devourer. It is a force of pure, logical consumption. It will expect your perfect, logical defenses. It will not expect us." Gina, who had been quietly cleaning a smudge of blood from her sword blade, spoke without looking up. "You breed your warriors without fear. You think this makes them strong. But it also makes them blind. They cannot understand an enemy who fights with nothing to lose. They cannot understand an enemy who finds a way where there is no way. We call that courage. And you cannot program it." Taeho was silent for a long time. He looked from Minsu's eager, determined face to Gina's calm, resolved one. He looked at the sword, now sheathed again on her back. That simple piece of metal had defeated his best. It was a symbol he could no longer dismiss. He thought of the scourge. He thought of his vast, orderly fleets. He thought of their perfect, predictable battle plans. And for the first time, he wondered if perfection was enough. The human had shown him a flaw in perfect logic. A flaw that had won. What do you propose?" he asked, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. Minsu took a deep breath. "A joint military command. We share our technology. You share yours. Your ships provide the strong, orderly front. Our ships, our soldiers, we operate on the flanks. We find the weak points. We do the things you would never think to do because they are not logical. We fight with our hearts as well as our heads." Taeho looked at Gina. "And you? You would lead these unpredictable attacks." Gina met his gaze. "If that is where I am needed." The Cthar leader turned and looked out the large viewport at the stars. His homeworld was out there. Billions of his people, living in perfect, ordered harmony. They were facing extinction by the scourge. And now these two humans, these chaotic, emotional, illogical creatures were offering him a thread of hope. A hope built not on superior strength, but on a different kind of strength altogether. He had spent his whole life believing in one truth. Now that truth was broken. The human warrior had broken it with her sword. He turned back to them. The conflict was clear in the set of his shoulders, in the slight droop of his head. I must consider this, he said. His voice was not the voice of a supreme leader giving orders. It was the voice of a being who had just had his entire world challenged. You will be taken to a room. You will wait. I will give you my answer soon. He gestured to his guards. This time, they did not surround the humans threateningly. They simply escorted them from the chamber, leading them away to wait for a decision that would now, for the first time, be uncertain. The room they were taken to was not a cell, but it felt like one. It was small and plain, with smooth gray walls and a single bench. There was no window. The air was cool and still. A silent Kthar guard stood outside the closed door. Minsu paced back and forth, the sound of his boots on the floor the only noise. He ran a hand through his hair. He's considering it. He's actually considering it. I can't believe it. Gina, you were incredible. You showed him. Gina sat on the bench, her hands resting on her knees. She was not pacing. She was perfectly still, her eyes closed. She was not sleeping. She was recovering her energy, calming her mind after the fight. He is not considering an alliance, she said quietly, without opening her eyes. He is considering a problem. What do you mean? Minsu stopped his pacing. He is a leader who has never been wrong. Today he was wrong. In front of his own warriors. He is not thinking about the scourge right now. He is thinking about his pride. A wounded pride is more dangerous than any alien monster. Minsu's hopeful expression faded. You think he will go back on his word? He gave his word to listen. He listened. He did not give his word to agree. She opened her eyes and looked at the featureless door. He is fighting a battle inside himself, and we do not know which side will win. In his private chamber, Taeho was indeed fighting a battle. The room was large and sparsely decorated, a place for thought. He stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. A creeping, red stain represented the scourge. It was getting closer to Kthar space every day. His mind was a storm. The human, Gina, was a ghost in his thoughts. He saw her calm face. He saw the way she moved, like water around stone. He saw the spark in her eyes when she spoke of courage. That he had been taught that emotion was a flaw. Clouded judgment. It led to mistakes. Yet, that human's emotions, her determination, her will, had been the source of her strength. It made no sense. He replayed the fight in his mind. His herald had executed every move with perfect, logical precision. It had assessed the target's defenses and applied maximum force. By all Kthar logic, it should have won in the first 3 seconds. But it had lost. The human had not fought with logic. She had fought with something else. Instinct, feeling, a deep, intuitive understanding of the moment. She had seen an opportunity that did not exist in any combat algorithm. She had created a victory out of nothing. Minsu's words echoed in his head. The scourge will not expect us. Was it possible? Was their chaotic, messy way of thinking the very thing needed to fight a mindless enemy? An enemy that would surely predict and counter every logical, orderly move the Kthar made. The idea was terrifying. It went against everything he was. Everything his people were. To accept this offer would be to admit that the Kthar path, the path of pure logic and discipline, was incomplete. It was to say that they needed these chaotic humans. It was to let that chaos into their perfect, ordered society. He imagined Kthar warriors learning from humans. He imagined them being taught to be courageous. He imagined the mess, the noise, the unpredictability. It felt like a disease waiting to spread. His pride screamed at him to reject them, to find a reason, any reason, to call the duel void. He could say the human used a forbidden energy source in her sword. He could say she cheated. His warriors would believe him. He could have the 2 humans executed, and then continue with his original plan to force humanity into submission. It would be the safe choice. The logical choice to preserve the purity of his culture. But then he looked back at the holographic map. The red stain of the scourge was vast. It was hungry. It was coming. His logic, cold and hard, presented him with a new equation. If he chose pride, and his perfect Kthar fleets failed against the scourge, then his entire species would be consumed. Their perfect order would be gone forever, eaten by a mindless beast. If he chose the humans, and their chaos corrupted his people, then the Kthar way of life would still be lost, just in a different way. But if he chose the humans, and their chaos was the key to victory, then his people would survive. They would be changed, perhaps forever, but they would live. It was a terrible choice. A choice between 2 different kinds of death. He thought of Gina's face. There was no hate in it. There was only a quiet certainty. She had not fought to humiliate him. She had fought to show him a truth. The truth was that he was afraid of the scourge. He was afraid of losing. And now he was afraid of these humans and the change they represented. The door to his chamber slid open. One of his commanders stood there. Supreme Commander, the humans have waited long enough. What is your decision? Do we prepare the submission documents? Taeho looked from his commander's loyal, logical face back to the terrifying red stain on the galaxy map. His pride was a heavy weight. His fear was a cold stone in his stomach. He knew what the old Taeho, the certain Taeho, would have done. But that Taeho had not seen a human warrior walk away from a duel she had won without killing her opponent. That Taeho had not understood that strength could be quiet, and that courage was a weapon. He took a deep, slow breath. The air felt different in his lungs. Bring them to me, he said, his voice low. I have made my decision. The door to the small room slid open. The same Kthar guard stood there, its expression unreadable. It did not speak, but simply gestured for them to follow. Minsu looked at Gina. Her face was calm, but her body was tense, ready for anything. She stood up smoothly and walked out, Minsu close behind her. They were led back to the main crystal chamber. The walk felt longer this time. Minsu's mind raced with possibilities. Was this it? Were they about to become the architects of a new alliance? Or were they walking to their execution for daring to challenge the Kthar leader? They entered the chamber. Taeho was standing in the same spot as before, a tall, dark statue against the star-filled viewport. But something about him was different. His shoulders were not thrown back with the same absolute pride. He seemed more still, more heavy. He did not wait for them to speak. I have considered your words, his translated voice said. It was flat, but there was a strange tension underneath it. I have considered what I saw in the proving grounds. Minsu felt a flicker of hope. Then you see the value of an alliance? Taeho's head tilted. I see a problem. You speak of partnership, of sharing, but you are weak. Your technology is inferior. Your bodies are soft. You bring only this chaos, this unpredictability. It is not a foundation for a partnership. It is a recipe for failure. The hope in Minsu's chest began to curdle into dread. Supreme Commander, we bring a different way of thinking, a different kind of strength. You saw it. I saw a trick. Taeho's voice rose, the first real emotion they had heard from him. It was anger, hot and sharp. A single warrior winning a single fight does not win a war. Your way is a sickness. Your chaotic, individualistic spirit would poison the perfect order of my Imperium. We cannot fight the scourge with feelings. We cannot fight it with a piece of metal. He took a step forward, his many eyes fixed on Gina. You would doom the entire galaxy for the sake of your pride. For your freedom. Gina met his gaze, her own eyes steady. And you would doom it for the sake of yours, she said, her voice quiet but clear. You are so afraid of being wrong that you would rather lose everything than try something new. Her words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Taeho stared at her. The truth of her statement hit him like a physical blow. She had seen right through him. She had seen the fear he was trying to hide, even from himself. The fear of change. The fear of admitting his way was not the only way. The anger that had been boiling inside him now overflowed. Pride and fear mixed into a dangerous cocktail. He would not be lectured. He would not be seen through by this creature. The negotiation was over. He would show them who was in control. That he made a sharp, sudden gesture with one of his upper hands. There was a series of soft hisses. Hidden panels in the smooth crystal walls slid open. From them, a dozen Kthar shock troopers filed into the room. They were larger than the guards, their shells thicker, their armaments bulkier. They moved with a silent, lethal grace, quickly forming a circle around the two humans. The barrels of their pulse rifles, glowing with a soft blue light, were aimed directly at Minsu and Gina. The air grew cold. The hope Minsu had felt was gone, replaced by a crushing certainty. They had lost. The lead trooper took a step forward, its weapon pointed at Gina's chest. His translated voice was a harsh buzz. On your knees. You are now prisoners of the Kthar Imperium. Commander Minsu froze. His mind went blank with terror. He slowly, stiffly, began to lower himself to the floor. There was no other choice. It was over. But Gina did not move. She stood perfectly straight amidst the circle of alien soldiers. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. She looked not at the troopers, not at their weapons, but at Taeho. Her eyes held his, and in them, he saw no surrender. Slowly, deliberately, she reached over her shoulder. The sound of metal sliding against leather was incredibly loud in the tense silence. She drew her sword. The polished blade caught the light, gleaming in the crystal room. It was a small, defiant gesture in the face of overwhelming force. Taeho felt a jolt of pure, undiluted shock. Was she insane? This was not a duel. This was a squad of his best soldiers. They would reduce her to atoms. He took a frantic step forward, his arm shooting out, palm open. "Stop!" he shouted. The word was a raw command, filled with disbelief and a sudden, strange panic. "This is madness. One blade against a dozen energy weapons. You will be vaporized. You will be erased." Gina raised her sword, holding it in a high, ready position. Her knuckles were white on the grip. She took a deep, slow breath, her eyes never leaving his, and then, she took a step forward. It was not a run. It was not a charge. It was a walk. A slow, steady, purposeful step directly towards Taeho, through the circle of stunned soldiers. The troopers hesitated. Their training, their entire existence was based on responding to threats. This was not a threat. This was something else. This was a statement. They looked to their supreme commander, their weapons wavering, waiting for the order to fire. Taeho could only watch, his mind reeling. She was walking towards him, through a wall of guns, as if they were not even there. Her walk was the same as her fight. Fluid, inevitable, and utterly without fear. He saw the absolute certainty in her eyes. She knew she would die. She had accepted it. And she was choosing to spend her last moments not on her knees, but on her feet, walking forward. She was showing him one final time what courage looked like. She took another step. The troopers tightened their grips, their fingers on the triggers. They looked at Taeho, waiting for the signal. But the signal did not come. Taeho was trapped, paralyzed by the sight of this human who would not be broken, who would not bow, who would not stop. Gina took another step. The circle of troopers was tight around her. The muzzles of their weapons were so close she could feel the heat coming from them. The air smelled of ozone and the sharp, metallic scent of Kthar bodies. Her own heart was a loud drum in her ears, but her hands were steady on the sword. She did not look at the guns. She kept her eyes on Taeho. He was the lock. He was the only thing that mattered. She saw the conflict raging in his face, in the way his whole body was rigid with tension. He was shouting, but she did not hear the words anymore. She only saw his eyes. She saw the moment his anger began to break against the wall of her resolve. She took another step. She was now halfway to him. A trooper shifted, its weapon barrel almost touching her arm. It buzzed a warning, a harsh electronic sound. She ignored it. Her world had narrowed to this path, to the leader at the end of it. Minsu watched from his knees, his breath frozen in his chest. He was sure that at any second, a flash of blue light would turn her to dust. He wanted to scream, to beg her to stop, but he couldn't make a sound. He was witnessing something beyond bravery. This was a kind of faith. A faith in an idea so strong she was willing to die for it without a single flinch. Taeho saw it too. He saw the faith. He saw the absolute belief that she was right. And in that moment, his own certainty shattered completely. All his life, he had believed in power. The power of fleets, the power of weapons, the power of perfect order. He had believed that if you had enough power, you could control everything. You could control outcomes. You could control other species. This human warrior, with her one piece of metal, had no power. She was about to die. And yet, she was in complete control. She was controlling the entire room. She was controlling him. She was not doing it with force. She was doing it with will. She was showing him that the strongest power in the universe was not the power to destroy, but the power to choose. She had chosen to walk. And he had to choose. He could choose to have her killed. He could prove his power. He could erase this problem. But he knew, with a cold, sick feeling, that it would solve nothing. It would not make him right. It would only prove that he was so afraid of her truth that he had to destroy it. He would spend the rest of his life, and the life of his species, knowing that he had chosen fear over hope. He looked at her, step by step, walking to her death for a chance, just a chance to save her people. To save his people. The words came out choked and quiet, barely a whisper, but the troopers heard it through their comms. Stand down. The order was so soft, so unexpected, that for a moment, nothing happened. The lead trooper turned its head, its many eyes blinking in confusion. Taeho said it again, his voice a little stronger, filled with a terrible, weary finality. I said stand down. Lower your weapons. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, with a series of soft clicks and whirs, the blue glow from the pulse rifles faded. The troopers lowered their weapons, stepping back to create a path. They were confused, but they obeyed. Gina finally stopped walking. She stood an arm's length from Taeho. Her sword was still raised, but the fight was gone from her posture. She was simply waiting. Her chest rose and fell with deep, even breaths. Minsu slowly, shakily, got to his feet. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The troopers were standing down. Gina was alive. Taeho looked at Gina. He looked at the sword, then into her eyes. The pride and the anger were gone from his face. What was left was something raw and new, something humble. You would have died, he said, his voice rough. Yes, she answered simply. Why? Because someone has to show you that there is another way, even if only for a moment. Taeho was silent for a long time. He looked past her at Min-soo, who was standing now, his face pale but hopeful. He looked at his own troopers, their perfect discipline now shadowed by confusion. He had built his entire empire on order. And today, one human had brought it all to a standstill with a single, simple act of defiance. He turned his gaze back to Gina. He saw the future in her eyes. A future of struggle and chaos, yes, but also a future of hope. A future where they might actually win. He took a deep breath. The air in the crystal chamber felt different. It felt new. He looked at Commander Min-soo. Explain your proposal again, Taeho said. His voice was hollow, but it was clear. It was the sound of a wall breaking down. Explain this alliance. Min-soo stepped forward, his legs still weak. He began to speak, his words tumbling out, about shared technology, joint commands, and combined strategies. But Taeho was not really listening to the words. He was watching Gina. She slowly, gracefully, lowered her sword. The metal made a soft sound as she slid it back into the sheath on her back. The gesture was one of peace. It was over. The human warrior had walked. And her walk had not ended in death. It had ended here at the beginning of something new. For the first time since the Scourge had appeared on the galactic maps, Taeho, the supreme leader of the Kthar, felt a flicker of something he thought his people had lost forever. It was not the cold comfort of logic. It was the warm, terrifying, and brilliant spark of hope.